Hey guys, this week's video is dedicated to all our brothers and sisters in the land of Israel. This week's Torah portion, Pasha Terumah, we have a description of all the vessels, all the different things that were used in the tabernacle as well as later in the temple. And we have a description of the ark, the most precious of them, which contained the 10 commandments, the tablets that Moshe brought down from Mount Sinai. And what was unique about the ark is that it had these poles, that when the Jewish people would travel, they had these poles attached to them so they could carry it. Now that wasn't unique. Almost all the vessels in the temple had these poles, so that when the Jewish people traveled through the desert, they could carry the vessels. What was unique is that these were never removed from the ark. The other vessels, when the Jewish people camped, they weren't traveling, you could take off the poles. We're not traveling now, why do we need poles? But the ark always had to have the poles on. So that whenever, no matter, at the ready, the Levites could grab the ark and go out. Let's say they were attacked by another nation, they could take the ark and lead the Jewish people into battle. And there's a powerful lesson here, this idea of always having the poles attached. This is the idea is that, Judaism travels with us. The ark travels with us. God travels with us. So often we think that, when I'm grounded, when I'm settled, when I'm within my home, when I'm within my community, that's where Judaism is. When I'm within my temple, when I'm within my synagogue, that's where Judaism is. When I'm on the road, when I'm traveling, it doesn't even have to be physically, it could be, metaphorically as we go through life. I don't know. It doesn't always fit in. I'm not always comfortable to have godliness with me, to have my Judaism with me. It doesn't always feel appropriate. It feels there's a disconnect. The lesson is that the poles always have to remain on. There should never be a disconnect. No matter where we are in life, no matter where we are traveling, the ark travels with us. God travels with us. Judaism travels with us. Torah travels with us. It's always with us, no matter the challenge in front of us, whether it's the desert we're traveling through, whether it's just a little hiccup here or there. No matter where we find ourselves, we always have to be grounded in the fact that we are here for a reason. It's not like, I'm not at my destination, so I'm just lost. No, God put you here for a reason. Let me share with you a beautiful story that I just read. There's a fellow in Tzfat named Big Mo. Well, it's not his real name. His real name is Rabbi Mordechai Ziv. And he gives tours throughout the city of Tzfat to many people who travel there. Well, in 1981, he was on his own spiritual journey towards Judaism. And he was studying in a yeshiva in Morristown, New Jersey. And every Friday, everybody, a bunch of yeshiva boys would get in the van and they would go around to different businesses in the area and they would visit people before Shabbat, help the guys put on tefillin, share something about the Torah portion, etc. Well, it was one Friday afternoon and it was a heavy snowstorm. And they had planned that afterwards they would spend Shabbos in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, by the Rebbe in 770. Well, because of the snowstorm, when they came towards the city, the bridge was closed and they had to turn around. But because it was such heavy traffic because of the snowstorm, they weren't going to make it back to the yeshiva in time for Shabbos. So they pulled off in Livingston, New Jersey. And they decided we're just going to park, we'll hide the keys behind the tire, layer up as best as we can, and let's find a house with a mezuzah. Livingston, New Jersey has a large Jewish community, and they started looking for a home with a mezuzah. Well, they came to the first home with a mezuzah, and the lady thought they were fundraising and said, "Go away, it's right before Shabbat, why are you fundraising now?" And they're like, "We're not fundraising, we're just stuck." And she just didn't. So they kept walking, and a few blocks later, they were getting nervous, but they found a house with a mezuzah. They knocked on the door, and somebody opens the door and says, "Wait, who are you?" And they said, we're a bunch of yeshiva boys stuck for Shabbos. He says, "How many are you?" And they're like, "Well, there's 12 of us." There's a big group. He was so happy. He said, come on in. And he gave them a big hug, and they're like, "What's going on?" This person said, "You don't understand. Tonight was my father's yahrzeit. And the whole time I was looking forward to saying Kaddish for my father. But services were canceled because of the snowstorm. And I was thinking, I was so despondent. I'm not going to be able to say Kaddish for my father. And now we have a whole minyan show up at my door. What? This is amazing." And they were so happy. They davened together, they had services, he was able to say Kaddish, and then he walked them over in the snowstorm to the Chabad rabbi who lives in Livingston so they could spend Shabbos by him. Amazing. Fast forward to 2007. Rabbi Mordechai finds out that his father had just passed away in Long Island, and he immediately flies from Israel to Long Island to be by the funeral and sit Shiva. Well, as the Shiva was ending and it was coming Shabbat, he decided he was going to spend Shabbat in Crown Heights because he was really the only one in his family who was religious and he wanted to spend it in a more religious atmosphere. Friday morning there was a snowstorm and he was stuck. And so he was going to spend Shabbat with his family in New Jersey, but he wanted to make sure he would be able to say Kaddish. His father had just passed away. So he called up the Chabad rabbi, Rabbi Weisfish in Huntington Beach, and he said, are you going to have a minyan? He says, I don't know, I hope so. But with the snowstorm, who knows who will show up? My friends, right before Shabbat, a car on their way with 6 yeshiva students on their way to the Chabad of the Hamptons got stuck in the snowstorm and ended up at Rabbi Weisfish right before Shabbat. And you can imagine, this was like history repeating itself. And he said, oh my gosh, now we have our minyan. And Rabbi Ziv told them the story that happened 35 years earlier. No matter where we find ourselves, we might think we're stuck. We might think there's a snowstorm. Rochester, right? We're in a snowstorm. We can't get up. Wherever you find yourself, the ark travels with us. There's a reason why we're there. God's with us. He knows it's not always about the destination. The journey is just as important, if not more so. Shabbat Shalom.